The sky turned dark at noon, not from clouds or an eclipse, but from the massive ships that appeared without warning. They hovered over every major city on Earth, blocking the sun with their huge metal bodies. People ran in panic. Cars crashed. Phones stopped working. The world's armies tried to fight back, but their weapons did nothing against the ships. 3 days later, the aliens showed themselves. They called themselves the Vraxians. They stood 7 feet tall with pale skin that looked almost like it glowed. Their eyes were huge and black, with no pupils. They had 4 long fingers on each hand and moved with a strange grace. "We come to claim this world," the alien leader said on all TV channels at once. "Resistance is pointless. Your weapons cannot harm us." Jack Miller watched this broadcast from his small cabin in the woods of Montana. He had been a Navy SEAL for 12 years before leaving to live alone. He had fought in wars. He had seen bad things, but nothing like this. "They think we'll just give up," he said to himself, loading his hunting rifle even though he knew it probably wouldn't help. Within a week, the Vraxians set up what they called night zones in every city. These were large areas kept in total darkness where humans were not allowed to go. The aliens lived and worked in these zones. "Your kind fears the dark," the Vraxian ambassador said in another broadcast. "It is built into your weak minds. You created fire and light because you could not face the shadows. We evolved in darkness. We rule it. This is why we are superior." The world's leaders tried to fight back. They sent armies. They fired missiles. Nothing worked. The Vraxian weapons were too strong. Their ships could not be damaged. After 2 weeks of fighting, the human death toll reached millions. The President of the United States signed a treaty. Other countries followed. Humans would live in the light. Vraxians would rule the dark. Anyone who entered a night zone would be killed. Jack didn't trust the aliens. He began watching them from the edges of the nearest night zone, which had once been the city of Bosman. He used his old military gear, night vision goggles, thermal cameras, and binoculars. He took notes on what he saw. The Vraxians moved differently at night. They were faster, more confident. They had technology that seemed to work better in darkness. They had set up strange buildings in the center of the night zone, buildings that glowed with a blue light that somehow made the darkness even deeper around it. They're not just living in the dark, Jack realized after a week of watching. They're doing something else. He wasn't the only one watching. On his 3rd night of observation, Jack noticed a woman using binoculars from another hiding spot. He approached her carefully. "Military?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Army Ranger. Samantha Winters." Jack Miller, Navy SEAL. They shared notes. Samantha had seen the Vraxians bringing strange equipment into the night zone. She had also noticed they seemed to avoid bright lights. Even flashlights seemed to make them uncomfortable. "They think darkness is their strength," Jack said. "But they don't understand something important about humans." "What's that?" Samantha asked. "We've been telling stories about monsters in the dark since we first made fire," Jack replied. "We've been afraid of the dark for thousands of years. And what do you do when you're afraid of something for that long?" Samantha smiled slightly. "You learn to fight it." "Exactly. They think we fear the dark because we're weak. But we've been preparing to fight in darkness our whole existence. The Vraxians just don't know it yet." They made a plan to learn more, to go deeper into the night zone, to understand the enemy, to find weaknesses. The aliens thought they owned the darkness. But Jack and Samantha were going to show them that humans had been facing their fears for a very long time. And when humans face their fears, they become dangerous. Very dangerous. Catherine Brooks was not a soldier. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Before the Vraxians came, that meant she studied bacteria found in space rocks. Now she studied real aliens. The government had put her in a secret lab under what used to be NASA headquarters. Her job was to learn everything she could about how the Vraxians' bodies worked. They see differently than we do, Catherine told her small team as they looked at tissue samples taken from a dead Vraxian. The alien had been killed when its small ship crashed during a storm. It was the only Vraxian body humans had. Their eyes collect light in a way ours can't, she explained, pointing to the strange black eyes under her microscope. They can see heat patterns too, like snakes. But look at this part of the eye. It's very weak. I think bright light hurts them. While Catherine worked in her lab, Jack and Samantha built a network of watchers around the night zone in Bozeman. They found other military veterans, police officers, and hunters who were brave enough to help. Each person took turns watching the aliens and writing down what they saw. They always followed the same paths, Jack said one night as the group met in his cabin. 10 people sat around his table, looking at maps they had drawn. They never change their patrol routes. And they rely on machines to help them see, Samantha added. She had snuck closer to the night zone border than anyone else. They wear something on their belts that beeps when it detects movement. But I noticed something. If you move very, very slowly, the machine doesn't notice. A man named Pete, who had been a hunter for 30 years, nodded. That makes sense. Most predators are triggered by sudden movements. Prey that freezes or moves very slowly is harder to spot. Jack looked thoughtful. So they're not perfect in the dark. They have help. Over the next 2 weeks, their group grew to 20 people. They called themselves the Night Watchers. Each person had a special skill. Some were good at moving silently. Others knew how to hide in plain sight. A few could make weapons out of almost anything. Catherine continued her research. She managed to get a message to Jack through a trusted friend. The scientist says they can't hear as well as we can, Jack told the group during another meeting. Their hearing evolved differently. They mostly rely on their eyes and their machines. That gives us an advantage, Samantha said. If we can move slowly enough and stay quiet enough, maybe we can get into the night zone without them noticing. Jack nodded. But we need to know why we go in there. We need a goal. That question was answered 3 days later when Pete came running to Jack's cabin in the middle of the day. They're taking people, he said, out of breath. From the edge of town. They're grabbing anyone who gets too close to the night zone border. They don't kill them. They take them inside. The group gathered quickly. They needed a plan. We need to know what happens to those people, Samantha said. We need to go in. It's too dangerous, an older man named Frank argued. We don't have the right equipment. Jack had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. Actually, we might. In my Navy SEAL days, we had special suits designed for night operations. They masked body heat and reduced noise. I know how they were made. Can you make more? Samantha asked. Jack nodded slowly. With the right materials, and I have an idea where to get them. Catherine sent another message that evening. She had discovered something else important. The Vraxians didn't just hate bright light. They were actually afraid of it. Their skin burned easily in sunlight. It was why they created the night zones. They're not as strong as they want us to think, Jack told the others. They have weaknesses, and now we know what some of them are. The group made a decision. They would build the special suits. They would train to move silently. They would learn to become invisible in the darkness. Then they would enter the night zone and find the missing people. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Making the special suits was not easy. Jack needed materials that were hard to find. The group split up into teams to gather what they needed. Samantha led a team to an old military supply store 50 miles away. They found fabric that could block heat signatures. Pete and his hunting friends collected special plants from the forest that could be made into dark dyes that wouldn't reflect any light. Catherine sent them designs for masks that would filter their breath. Vraxians could detect carbon dioxide in high amounts, she had discovered. The masks would spread out their breath so the alien sensors wouldn't pick it up. We're becoming ghosts, Jack said as they worked on the first suit in his cabin. It was completely black, with multiple layers of the special fabric. The mask covered the whole face and had strange tubes that spread breath out across the back. It took 2 weeks to make 5 suits. They only worked at night because the Vraxians had small flying machines that watched during the day. These machines could see through windows, so they covered Jack's cabin windows with thick blankets when they worked. While they made the suits, they also trained. They practiced moving very, very slowly. They learned to hold perfectly still for long periods. They figured out how to control their breathing to stay calm in scary situations. The Vraxians think darkness makes us afraid, Samantha told the group as they trained. But fear can make you stronger if you learn to use it. Jack chose 4 people to go with him into the night zone for their first mission. Samantha was one. Pete would go too because he was the best at moving silently. A woman named Lisa, who had been a police officer, would join them. The 5th person was Alan, who knew the city of Bosman better than anyone else. We go in, we find out what's happening to the missing people, and we come back, Jack explained the night before the mission. We don't fight unless we have no choice. This is about information. The next night, they put on their suits and moved toward the edge of the night zone. The border was marked with strange glowing blue lights that were spaced out every 50 feet. Between the lights, it was completely dark. The Vraxians had machines that patrolled the border, walking back and forth on regular paths. Jack watched the pattern of the machines. There's a gap, he whispered to the others. Every 17 minutes, there's a 30-second window when this section isn't being washed. They waited. When the gap came, they moved. They had practiced so much that they crossed the border in perfect silence, walking slowly and carefully between the blue lights. Inside the night zone, everything was different. The buildings were still the same ones from the city, but the Vraxians had changed them. Strange lights glowed from some windows, lights that somehow made the darkness deeper instead of brighter. The streets had new markings that glowed faintly in patterns humans couldn't understand. And it was quiet, so quiet they could hear their own heartbeats inside their masks. They moved from shadow to shadow, staying completely still whenever Vraxians passed by. The aliens moved confidently through their dark kingdom, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups of 3 or 4. They talked to each other in strange clicking sounds. Alan led them toward the center of the city where the old courthouse stood. Catherine's research suggested this was where the Vraxians had their main base. If the missing people were anywhere, they would be there. As they got closer to the courthouse, they saw more Vraxians. The aliens had built a strange tower on top of the building that reached up toward their main ship in the sky. The tower pulsed with the same blue light as the border markers. Look, Samantha whispered, pointing at a side door of the courthouse. 2 Vraxians were leading a group of humans inside. The people walked stiffly, like they couldn't control their own movements. Their eyes were open but empty. They're controlling them somehow, Pete said very quietly. Jack nodded. That's why we're here. We need to find out how and why. They watched and waited for their chance to get closer. The hunt had begun. Getting inside the courthouse was harder than crossing the border. Vraxians stood guard at every door. They had machines that scanned for heat and movement. The 5 humans watched from the shadows of an old store across the street. We need a distraction, Jack whispered. His voice was barely audible through his mask. Lisa pointed to a small side door where only 1 Vraxian stood guard. That's our best chance, but we still need to get past that guard. They watched for an hour, learning the patterns. Every 40 minutes, the guard was replaced by another Vraxian. During the change, there was a 10-second gap when no one watched the door. We'll have 10 seconds, Jack said. We need to be ready. They moved closer, hiding behind abandoned cars. The night zone was filled with things people had left behind when they fled. Cars, shopping bags, even toys dropped by children. The 5 humans used these objects as cover, moving from one to another when no Vraxians were looking. When the time came for the guard change, they were ready. The first guard walked away. They counted silently. 1, 2, 3. On 9, they moved. Pete reached the door first and tried the handle. It was locked. Lisa pulled out small metal tools from a pocket in her suit. She had been good at opening locks when she was a police officer. Her fingers worked quickly. The lock clicked open just as they heard the new guard approaching. They slipped inside and closed the door. They were in. The courthouse was dark, but different from the outside darkness. Here, strange blue lines ran along the floors and walls. They gave off just enough light for the humans to see shades. The lines seemed to be showing paths. "They're like roads for the Vraxians," Samantha whispered. "They follow these lines." This was useful information. If the aliens followed set paths, the humans could avoid those paths and stay hidden. They moved deeper into the building, staying away from the blue lines. They had to freeze in place several times when Vraxians walked by. The aliens moved with complete confidence, never looking into the dark corners where the humans hid. On the 3rd floor, they found something strange. A large room had been filled with glass containers. Each container held a human, standing completely still with eyes open but empty. Tubes ran from the containers to a large machine in the center of the room. "They're collecting something from them," Alan said, his voice shaking a little. Jack looked more closely at the machine. It was gathering a strange glowing liquid that came through the tubes from the humans. The liquid was stored in large tanks marked with Vraxian symbols. "We need to tell Catherine about this," he said. "She might know what it means." They took pictures with small cameras built into their masks. Then they heard something that made them all freeze. A loud alarm started ringing throughout the building. Red lights flashed along the blue lines on the floor. "What happened?" Pete asked, panic in his voice. "I don't know," Jack said, "but we need to get out now." They moved back toward the stairs, but the paths were now filled with Vraxians running in all directions. There was no way to reach the side door they had come through. "This way," Alan said, leading them down a different hallway. "There's a fire escape on this side of the building." They ran as quietly as they could, no longer able to move slowly. 2 Vraxians spotted them and made loud clicking sounds that must have been alarm calls. The aliens started chasing them. "Go!" Jack shouted. He and Samantha turned to face the Vraxians while the others kept running. Jack pulled out a small weapon he had made. It shot bright light instead of bullets. He fired it at the first Vraxian's face. The alien screamed and fell, covering its huge black eyes. Samantha threw a small ball at the second alien. It burst into a cloud of tiny metal pieces that floated in the air. The alien's sensors started beeping wildly, confused by so many small moving targets. They turned and ran after the others. They reached the fire escape and climbed down as fast as they could. When they reached the ground, they saw Vraxians coming from all directions. "Split up," Jack ordered. "Meet back at the cabin." They ran into the darkness, each taking a different path. The hunt had changed. Now they were the hunted. But they had learned something important. They had seen the aliens' fear. It took 2 days for everyone to make it back to Jack's cabin. Pete arrived first, then Lisa and Alan together. Jack and Samantha were the last to return. They had to hide in an abandoned building for a full day while Vraxian search parties looked for them. "They're scared," Jack said when they finally gathered in the cabin. "I could see it in the way they moved after we escaped. They weren't just angry. They were afraid." Catherine arrived that evening. She had driven from her lab as soon as she got Jack's message about what they had found. "Show me the pictures," she said, her face serious. They connected the cameras to a computer and looked at the images of the humans in glass containers. Catherine studied them carefully. "They're harvesting something," she said after a long time. "See these tubes? They're taking something from the human brain. Something the Vraxians need." "What could aliens want from human brains?" Lisa asked. Catherine's eyes were wide with excitement. "Fear. They're harvesting fear." Everyone stared at her. "I've been studying their biology," she explained. "Their brains don't produce certain chemicals that ours do. One of those chemicals is released when humans feel fear. I think they need it for something important. That's why they keep telling us that darkness should make us afraid, Samantha said slowly. They want us to be scared. They feed on our fear. Jack stood up. This changes everything. If they need our fear, then not being afraid hurts them. We need to tell everyone. The government won't help, Pete said. They're too scared of the Vraxians. Then we'll do it ourselves, Jack replied. We'll build a radio transmitter. We'll broadcast what we know to everyone who's listening. Over the next week, they built a powerful radio transmitter using parts Alan collected from old electronic stores. They wrote a message explaining what they had learned about the Vraxians. Humans of Earth, the message began. The Vraxians feed on our fear. They need it to survive. If we stop being afraid of them, they become weaker. They are not as strong as they want us to think. The message included instructions on how to block heat signatures and move without being detected by Vraxian sensors. It told people that bright light hurt the aliens' eyes and confused their machines. On the night they planned to send the message, something unexpected happened. Vraxian ships appeared above the forest near Jack's cabin. Searchlights swept through the trees. They found us, Samantha said, looking out the window. Someone must have told them. Or they tracked us somehow, Jack said. It doesn't matter. We need to send the message now, before they stop us. Ellen started the transmitter. It hummed to life, ready to broadcast their message to every radio in the country. They're getting closer, Lisa warned, watching the ships through binoculars. Jack looked at his friends. Some of us need to go out there and distract them. Give Alan time to send the full message. I'll go, Samantha said immediately. Me too, Pete added. Jack nodded. The three of us will go. Catherine, Lisa, and Alan stay here and make sure the message gets sent. They put on their suits and slipped out the back door of the cabin. The forest was filled with strange blue light from the Vraxian ships. They could hear the aliens moving through the trees, searching. Remember, Jack said quietly to Samantha and Pete, they can only scare us if we let them. Don't be afraid. They split up and moved in different directions. Jack went straight toward the nearest ship. He had added something new to his suit, small bright lights that could be turned on suddenly. He got close to a group of Vraxians searching near a fallen tree. Then he pressed a button on his wrist. Bright white lights flashed all over his suit. The Vraxians screamed and fell back, covering their huge eyes. Jack turned and ran, leading them away from the cabin. He could hear other Vraxians shouting in the distance where Pete and Samantha were creating their own distractions. Back at the cabin, Alan watched the signal strength on the transmitter. It's working, he told Catherine and Lisa. The message is going out. All across the country, radios picked up the signal. People heard the truth about the Vraxians and their weakness. The night that was supposed to be a defeat became the beginning of a real resistance. The radio message spread faster than anyone expected. People copied it and sent it to others. Within 3 days, most humans knew that the Vraxians fed on fear. Jack, Samantha, and Pete had barely escaped the forest that night. They hid in caves for 2 days before making their way back to a new meeting place they had planned in case the cabin was found. Catherine brought news from the cities. People are fighting back, she told them when they all met in an old barn 20 miles from Jack's cabin. Not with guns, but with light and bravery. Groups of humans had started going to the edges of night zones all over the world. They brought bright lights and played loud music. The Vraxians didn't know how to respond. They had never faced humans who weren't afraid. It's working, Lisa said, but the Vraxians won't give up easily. She was right. The next day, the alien ships flew over major cities and dropped strange devices that released a gas. The gas made people feel afraid even when there was nothing to fear. Fear gas, Catherine said when she analyzed a sample. They're trying to create fear artificially because they can't get enough from us naturally anymore. Jack thought for a long time. We need to do more than just not be afraid. We need to take the fight to them. How? Ellen asked. We can't attack their ships. We don't have weapons that can hurt them. We attack their base in the courthouse, Jack said. We free the humans they're keeping there. We shut down their fear-collecting machine. It was a dangerous plan. The Vraxians would be expecting them now. But they had no choice. If the aliens could make people afraid with gas, the resistance would. The explosion at the courthouse changed everything. When the main fear-collecting machine was destroyed, the Vraxians lost control of their entire system. The blue lights went out in all night zones across the world. Their sensors stopped working. Their communication systems failed. Jack and his team led the rescued humans out of the city. The free people were confused at first. Their minds had been controlled for weeks or months. Slowly, their eyes began to focus again. They started to remember who they were. What happened to us? A woman asked as they walked. The Vraxian ambassador looked up at Jack with its huge black eyes. For the first time, a human saw real fear in those eyes. You will release me immediately, the alien said in its strange clicking voice, or my people will destroy your cities. Jack, Samantha, and Catherine had taken the ambassador to an underground bunker. The location was secret, known only to them and a few resistance leaders. Outside, Vraxian ships filled the sky, searching for their leader. Your people won't do anything until we finish talking, Jack said calmly. He sat across from the ambassador at a small table. The room was partly dark, with light only on the alien side. Jack sat in shadow. We know why you came to Earth, Catherine said, standing beside Jack. You need human fear to survive. It's a chemical your bodies can't produce. The ambassador's pale skin changed color slightly, turning a darker blue. Jack realized this was probably how Vraxians showed surprise. How did you learn this? The ambassador asked. We've been watching you, Samantha replied. Learning about you. While you thought we were just scared prey, we were studying you. Jack leaned forward. The ambassador flinched, not able to see him clearly in the shadows. Here's what's going to happen, Jack said. You're going to call your leaders. You're going to tell them that humans are no longer your food source. And then you're going to leave our planet. The ambassador made a sound like laughter. Impossible. We need what you produce. We will not leave. Jack had expected this answer. He nodded to Catherine, who pressed a button on a small device. A screen lit up on the wall, showing images from around the world. Humans were entering night zones in every city. They were wearing the new masks that filtered out fear gas. They carried light weapons and moved with confidence through the darkness. Look, Jack said. Your people are retreating everywhere. Humans aren't afraid anymore. We're angry. The ambassador watched the screen. Its blue color deepened. Even if you could control some cities again, Samantha added, you'd never get enough fear to feed your whole population. Not anymore. For a long time, the ambassador was silent. Then it spoke, its voice quieter now. Our home world is dying. The chemical your brains produce when afraid is necessary for our survival. Without it, my species will end. Catherine stepped forward. We can help you find another way. I've been studying your biology. There might be a way to create this chemical artificially without causing suffering. The ambassador looked at her with surprise. You would help us, after what we did. We're not like you, Jack said. We don't need others to suffer to survive. Over the next 3 days, they negotiated. The ambassador spoke with the Vraxian leaders. Catherine explained her ideas for creating the fear chemical in laboratories. It would be enough to help the aliens survive until they found a permanent solution. On the 4th day, the ambassador returned to its ship. Jack, Samantha, and Catherine watched from the roof of a tall building as the massive alien vessel rose into the sky. One by one, all across the world, the Vraxian ships left Earth's atmosphere. The night zones were dismantled. The blue lights disappeared. Darkness became normal again. 6 months later, Catherine's team had created the first batch of artificial fear chemical. As promised, they sent it to the Vraxian homeworld in unmanned ships. It wasn't charity. It was insurance. As long as the aliens got what they needed from these shipments, they had no reason to return to Earth. Jack stood outside his rebuilt cabin, looking up at the night sky. The stars were bright and clear. No alien ships blocked their light now. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" Samantha asked, standing beside him. "I don't know," Jack replied. "But if they do, they'll find us waiting. Not hiding in the light, but watching from the shadows." The night was peaceful now. Crickets chirped in the grass. An owl called from a nearby tree. Normal night sounds that had been missing during the Vraxian occupation. Humans had reclaimed the darkness. They had turned their ancient fear into strength, and any future visitors from the stars would have to remember the lesson the Vraxians had learned. Earth's humans might have evolved to fear the dark, but they had also learned to stalk in it.